Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And when it comes to general news in EVE Online, the Caldari celebrations have begun, so the Fourth Empire is holding its Union Day, that's what it's called. So you get a little bit of extra stuff to do, just flying to a Titan, shoot some fireworks at them, and you get some extra SP. There's also a daily login reward that's happening for the Union Day. So, you know, if you can, definitely try to just log into EVE Online every day. A little bit of effort, tiny little bit of effort, and you get some nice free skill points for all of that. We should also have the feeder rounds for the Alliance tournaments that are starting this weekend, or that are happening this weekend. Should be pretty interesting. I think everything will be on their main website. And other than that, September is starting, of course, so summer is ending. I'm really curious to see how things will evolve from here. We'll take a quick look at the New Eden store as well. If I'm not mistaken, well, sales are not over. Now we'll have Caldari themed sales if I look at the ships that are here front and center. So Kimotoro, Esketin skins are on sale. We've got some new Crow State Police skins. Oh, we saw some of these, for instance, on the Manticore that have a very nice effect that all the lights like flash when you go in and out of warp, so you can really land on someone and then you know, have like police sirens almost blaring. Pretty cool stuff. Definitely some very nice looking skins on these. Then we get some bundles, more sales for Caldari capitals and supers. And now let's take a quick look at the services as well. Nothing special happening here just yet, but all right, there we go. Caldari is the team at the moment in EVE Online, so whether or not you're Caldari, anyone can participate, and you've got sales and everything happening all around that. Let's move on to what you guys are mostly here for. Of course, the market will start with plex and stuff, and that's coming in at 210-215. Like that. So here we go for plex. On the Tigger, it's still going down a little bit, but you can see on the daily averages and the 5-day moving averages, then we've started to stop our descent and we're heading back for that 2.6 million average price, as the volumes have basically been able to stay up since the tax changes, the lower taxes in JITA or in NPC stations, which makes trading here way more interesting. So we can see that from all of this. If we look at the sellers, almost at 2.65 million, buyers are almost at 2.6 million as well, so they are being forced up at the moment. A little bit of upwards pressure for plex, some buying, perhaps some players starting to return after the summer break. And what you can obviously see here as well is that JITA is once again dominating the trade. We've got one seller in a trading hub in perimeter, and we've got 1, 2, 3 buyers also in the Tranquility trading tower, but that's it. Almost everything is happening in JITA 4.4, and that's the consequence of these taxes. And of course, JITA has the advantage as well, if I'm not mistaken, that you don't necessarily need to be within the client to do some plex trading in it. Then we've got the multiple pilot trading certificates that have also started to go up and pull away from 1.3 billion. A little bit of a volume spike here on a day with more than 50 of them being traded. And so the upwards pressure seems to be starting. 1.3 billion for the sellers, 1.25 billion for the buyers. Very narrow margin here again between sellers and buyers, showing, I would say, pretty strong demand since we are on the upside and the 5-day moving average is up. And yeah, from the last couple of weeks, I was personally expecting that the market would start to expect inflation, would predict some inflation, and so some upwards movement on at least some of these plex related items should be seen there. That was actually not happening. You can see here from mid-July we actually have like a little bit of a downward trend, and then plex, same thing right here from the start of August, a little bit of a downward trend there. I couldn't exactly tell you what was happening here, but we are starting to see, I think, that turnover after the summer, people coming back, Alliance tournament coming back, CCP bound to come out with more information as well, and thus we have a little bit more perhaps speculation on increased prices starting to show up here as well. For the skill extractors, interesting to see the skill extractors do something different from the skill injectors. We still have a 5-day moving average below the 20-day moving average, and we're still below below 300 million ISK. 296 million for the sellers, 294 million for the buyers. That super narrow margin is here as well. So I am personally seeing a little bit more demand start to show up. We should see that turnaround, but this is very unusual. We usually have very strong correlation between plex and skill extractors, but here perhaps a little bit of lag between what's happening. Could also be why my ticker is still down for plex, despite the fact that we're starting to see upwards pressure. It maybe just started to happen now with this first weekend of September. Then we've got the impact on the injectors. We're still under pressure last week. Personally, I don't oh no, we're just sideways last week and a little bit of downwards right here. 5-day moving average below 20-day moving average. That should be around a week ago. And I thought we would have continued pressure, considering that we are in Union Day. You're getting even more free skill points at this point, but no, we're starting to edge back up here as well. 5-day moving average above 20-day moving average and heading for 630 million ISK. It's 630 for the sellers and 616 million for the first buyer. So here again, narrow margin. I would say we're starting to see a little bit more demand creep into all of these items. And then we've got the small scale injectors that are finally moving in the same vein as the large scale injectors. You can see here that through the end of July and most of the month of August, we actually had a little bit of pressure going from above. What would this be? The 130 million mark, in this 135, I'm assuming that. So going below the 130 million mark and seeing that pressure here. But in the last week or so, we're starting to turn this around. 5-day again above the 20-day moving average, and we're back above 130 million on average, despite the fact, yeah, here on average we should be above 130 million, despite the fact that we still have some sellers at like 126.5 million and buyers coming in at 120 million. I think here we'll slowly, in all likeliness, close that gap, and then yeah, that's all there is available. Though, how the hell does the chart get a 130 plus average? And then we get sellers at 126.5, 127 in JITA, and 120 for the buyers. Not really sure what's happening here. We'll keep an eye on it, but this doesn't feel exactly right. We'll see what's happening here. Let's move on to the daily alpha injectors then, that last week had a very nice spike, well up from 40 million ISK towards 45 million. We are bouncing back down a little bit from that, but staying well clear of that 40 million mark. So I would say in a healthy demand situation here, 42 million for the sellers, 39 million for the buyers. Again, really narrow margin on something that's on average 40 million, only a 3 million market margin. That's really not a lot between those sellers and buyers. I would say again, showing that demand might just be picking up again. And are the hypercores confirming anything? No, they're still going down, well below 280,000 at this point. 267,000 for the sellers, 261,000 for the buyers. Volumes have started to pick up though, so it's going to be interesting to see in the upcoming weeks or so if this will start to pick back up. And then, well, since we're just through this this bit here, you can see in JITA 4.4 as well, part of Union Day. From time to time, you're getting some extra fireworks that fire off. There's also fireworks that go off behind the ship here on the exit. Let's zoom out a little bit, maybe see if we can. There we go. So this is also part of the extra animations in JITA 4.4 with the Union Day. It is pretty cool. No, that's not what I need. I need the market tab. There we go. So it'll be a little bit more animated in the background. I hope it's not too much of a distraction. But let's move on to the minerals that's coming in at 9.10. There we go. And let's of course start with titanium. Chart's not too easy to make a nice visual representation of what's happening, but overall, of course, we've seen in the last couple of months that 4.5 ISK range for titanium is the average range, and from time to time we're a little bit above that, a little bit below that, back above, back below, back above at the moment. So at the moment, I would say we're in the more expensive range for titanium. If we take JITA itself, 465 for the sellers, 440 for the buyers. So we are basically in the place where I would say if you have some titanium for sale and you can use the ISK, definitely do so at the moment. I do expect that in the upcoming days, perhaps week or so, we're seeing more supplies coming to take advantage of this price above 4.5, and we could very easily again push the average prices back down on too much supply, unless that increased demand that we start to see in the plex stuff also is actually something that will take place in the mineral markets. That you can never be sure of, but at the moment I would say we're slightly above average, slightly above 4.5 ISK, so it's a good time to be selling titanium if you have the need for that. Then we've got pyrite, that's also starting right at the tail end. You can see here we're starting to go back up here as well. The range, well, we're still well below 20 ISK, just above 17.5 is where we get like a tiny little bounce that's happening at the moment. We're talking 18 to 19 ISK for most sellers. We gotta be honest, it's only one seller at 18 and then 18 ISK for the buyer. So we're seeing a little bit of an upswing here as well. Again, the next coming weeks could be interesting if the plex stuff category has more room to grow and then the minerals start to go up as well. This could really be an indication of increased activity. For now, this is well within the range of just being a supply swing where people held off on the lower prices. This is starting to go back up and then it could get plugged very quickly as well. We can't be sure of what's happening here. For now, we get super flat chart for Mexelon, basically stuck at its range below 60, 50. Oh well, we're starting to get to 60 again for the sellers though, so this is slowly drying up. And then we get 56.5 for the buyers. Would not be surprised if we'll start to see that first move up, at least for the 5-day above the 20-day moving average for Mexelon in quite a bit of time. Then we have the Isogen chart that is trying to stay above 60. We're seeing a little bit of pressure on this one, but yeah, 59 for the first seller, 61 for the most sellers, and then 59 ISK as well for the buyers. And it's still the stocks, right? 18 million, 25 million, 17 million. So there's still some definitely Isogen in the weight for these higher prices. But you can also see once we get through this 100 million, we're comfortably above 60, then we get another 100 million, and then we start to pull up quite quickly. So I still hold that this is going to be one of those metrics that CCP is looking at for going through the fall, and then in the final quarter of EVE Online, we might, on some more demand, on some more activity after the summer, we might just have used up all of these supplies or most of these supplies, and then we could be in for way higher prices for Isogen because it should be a lot more expensive than Mexelon, considering active demand and supply and where it comes from, which is from LOSIC, way more risky of course. Then we've got the Noxium chart that is starting to go back up as well. There we go, right at the tail end, 5-day crossing the 20-day moving average, heading back towards 1250, which is in line with what we've seen in Tritane, what we've seen in Pyrite, and perhaps what we're starting to see in Mex as well. So 1100 for the sellers, going up to 1200 pretty quickly, and then 1120 for the buyers. They have been forced up above 1100 as well. So a couple of again, it's either an aggressive seller or it's also possible that someone just made a mistake and created this sell order while they were, for instance, if like you want to sell 500,000 units of Noxium, and there's a buy order at 1121 for only 350,000 units, then you can end up with the 150 as a sell order. I don't think it does that though, but there is a way to by mistake set up this really cheap sell order. That is true. It's not necessarily aggressive selling. Someone mentioned that in the comments previous time I made that reference. So let's look at the NOSIC ones then. Again, for the general trend, this could be important. Well, on Zydrine here, I am starting to see again a slight upwards movement, at least in the daily average. 5 days still very much right in line with the 20-day, but yeah, 858 again for one seller, and then 912 for most, so above 900 is for most sellers, and 860 for the buyers. Can't be said that that's a big margin, so decently strong demand, and a little bit of upward pressure is starting to be seen here as well. And then Megasite kind of confirming the trend by going back above 600 disk for most daily averages, 610 almost for the sellers, and look at that, 610 also for the buyers, coming in with slightly higher prices. And what is Morphite doing? Also going back up to 100,000 units a piece, just below that for the sellers, and 96.5 for the buyers. Again, if you're looking for narrow margins, this seems to be the week for that, and it could be an indication again of a little bit more demand creeping in, pushing those prices up, destroying all the margins between sellers and buyers. If that keeps up, then next week we could see higher prices in general. If I'm mistaken on that, and there is plenty of supply in waiting, then we could go back down very quickly, but we'll see how it works out. Quick note as well on Morphite, if I'm not mistaken, there is either some speculation or some data scrubbing that happened on the test server that indicates some Morphite anomalies specific to Nosik may be in the works to do something about this price. It's something that I have speculated on. Could also be Q4, of course, let's not forget that, but this would not be my time for me to gamble on Morphite going up in price even more. If there's one place where I can see CCP deciding on increasing supplies with Q4, with the end of resource scarcity, it would be Morphite, because this is of course crazy high prices. I still very vividly remember that when I've made some investments in Morphite and I made some profits on them, I bought below 10,000 discs. So seeing this stuff go for 100k does feel extremely expensive. Let's move on to the PI market next, coming in at 1625. There we go. Not expecting that much good news, although here you can see the broadcast nodes still going up well above 1.75 million, and in fact today's data point is at 2 million ISK. 175 for the sellers, 165 for the buyers, really narrow margin. Advanced PI materials still doing okay, or actually really well, and has that stronger demand due to industry. This could also be very interesting if you're looking then for that speculative play on potentially what we've seen so far in plex stuff and in minerals being the start of increased activity and thus more demand potentially for industry. Then you know these advanced PI materials could actually see 1 year high prices pretty easily on just any increased demand, because throughout the entire summer you can see here since the April rush, since the introduction of the industry changes, they've easily been able to maintain a price above 1.5, on average almost 175 million for instance for these broadcast nodes. So that increased demand even at the low industry output that we have now is just a reality. If that starts to pick up, if there's like an arms race in ASIC or anything like that, advanced PI materials could really become one of the real winners of that situation, despite the fact that we're seeing high prices now. It's actually an indication that things could take off from here. Then we get construction blocks that have finally pulled out of the rut and are actually heading towards 8,000 ISK, 8,000 for the sellers, 7,700 for the buyers. A little bit of a supply stop here though. We clearly see that there's not that much being supplied compared to the demand here, which has driven prices back up, which is quite a change from about a month ago where there were no buyers and plenty of suppliers. So this could also be increased activity, but not necessarily. It could just be people getting desperate and saying, well, construction blocks, that's not what we're going to bring to the market when it's going for 6,000 ISK. But let's take a look at the others. All right, consumer electronics, well, not below 5,000 ISK, but still very low, below 6,000. Yeah, 5.9 for the sellers, 5.2 for the buyers. And here you can see the situation of a month ago in construction blocks. Way more suppliers than buyers creating these super low prices. But we have to be honest here, today's data points are heading towards 6,000 disks, so slight upwards pressure here as well. Coolants are starting to turn the corner after a very sharp drop off, losing 30% of their price from 9k to 6,000 ISK. We are starting to bounce back a little bit as well. 7,500 for the sellers, 6,600 for the buyers. All right, I didn't expect to see this here as well, but let us be honest, this is the third category in a row of really raw materials, and of course the plex stuff, which is very unique and related to just how much money potentially is pouring into the game. There's also how much activity is happening into the game. We're seeing upwards movements on practically all of them. Even cryoprotectant solutions has its day a couple days ago above 100,000 disc on average, so clearly trying to turn the corner here as well. Not that much supply, 100,000 for the sellers, 96,000 for the buyers, a little bit more demand creeping in here as well apparently. Enriched uranium has stopped its descent and is now flat at 7,500. Sellers 8,000, above 8,000 pretty quickly. Buyers coming in at 7,600. The integrity response drones, alright, first one that is moving back down a little bit after reaching almost 2 million ISK on a day a couple of weeks ago. So this is actually, let's take a quick look at the actual prices, still quite reasonable and still quite well, with especially, look at that, 1.699, so 1.7 million for the sellers, 1.686, so 1.7 million as well, pretty much for the buyers. That strong demand, not just in advanced PI materials, but across the board so far, does seem to be happening, with mechanical parts also going back up. I mean, granted, it's from 6,000 disc, which is pretty close to 1 year low point, but it is going back up towards 7,000 at this point, 7,150 to 7,250 pretty quickly, and then 6,400 for the buyers. They're still waiting. Nanites, first one that's not confirming the trend, actually 1 year low point right now. You can see that 20-day moving average still going down, 5-day moving average still going down also, again another leg back down. So Nanites is not doing too well, 4,300 for the sellers, 4,200 for the buyers. If I were a speculator and I needed a PI investment, let's be honest, on this chart, this is where what I would try to buy, probably some of the cheapest nanites we've ever seen. Nano factories are quite well, staying pretty flat, just below 1 million ISK, just below 1 million for the sellers. But again, look at that margin, it's just completely gone. 959 for the sellers, 952 for the buyers. That's a super narrow margin, showing I would say a little bit more demand. Organic mortar applicators pulling back up a little bit as well at the high point of the last 2 to 3 months almost. 824,000 for the sellers and above 800,000 for the buyers here as well. Recursive computing module still has that annoying data point, stepping up here in August, ending well above 1 million. With the buyers, again, look at that, only 30,000, 35,000 ISK difference between sellers and buyers on something that costs over 1 million ISK. I would say that shows decently strong demand. Robotics is still suffering. This one has just really not been doing well. Still at that 1 year low point of 55,000 ISK, 56 for the sellers, 54 for the buyers. And this used to be worth like 100,000 ISK a piece easy. So yeah, these robotics basically not great. Then we get self-harmonizing power cores, flat well above a 1.5, 1.6 for the sellers. And again, look at that, 1.556 for the first buyer, 2,500 units here. This to me does start to be a little bit of speculation on upwards pressure on potentially seeing either inflation but also increased activity. Buying now can be betting on both of those things happening, and it could be that's still, despite the fact that this looks as one of the better charts of the last year. In EVE Online, this could still be one of the right places to jump in on these types of items. We've got sterile conduits, the volume increase quite noticeable as well, comfortably above 1 million here, with buyers above 1 million as well. So we're just continuing that trend of narrow margins and buyers pushing their prices up for some reason. Yukomi superconductors, also a slight move up here, back to 75,000 for the sellers, 70,000 for the first buyer as well. And then the wetware mainframes finally comfortably above 1.5 million, 158 for the sellers and 153 almost for the buyers. So this again showing that those buyers are pushing up and up, and you can see here 1,413, and then we're at 1.6 million before we get to the first order in Jita of a decent size. So that seems to again be a story that demand is picking up here. Let's see if advanced movements can confirm anything like that. We're talking 24.20. There we go, and as always we'll start with carbonite like items, crystalline carbonite for Galente production. Alright, going back up, and definitely in my opinion here buckling the trend. Now it's not a very visible trend on the crystalline carbonates, but we were starting to see lower peaks and then a return to normalcy at that 150-175 range, which we had reached like at the start of August. But now we get a breakout well above 175, and has been sustainably going up for the last week. 190 for the sellers, 181 for the buyers. It could be, look at the volumes though, these are down substantially. That supply has been cut off, but it could also be more aggressive buyers. This is not a very large margin. Next up we've got not metamaterials, but we're looking for titanium carbide for Caldari. This one is under pressure a little bit, going back below 200 ISK, but still has a pretty healthy premium from pretty much the 150 at the start of the year. 194 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. And this one shows that trend way better, right? You've got this peak at 350 here in April, and then you go down and down and down as the high points lower and lower, with eventually here in late July, beginning of August, it looked like we could get back to that more normal range of just above 150, but then we made our way back up above 200, and we've basically still been working on getting this little bump here absorbed by the market. But what is noticeable is we're starting to flatten out on that 5-day moving average, and we are doing so well above the previous flattening out here, where it looked like we would go back to normalcy. So to me, this again starts to feel like there may be some increased demand in the works. Ferrite carbide slowly moving back up as well. Previous range between 1 and 150, definitely mostly below 150. Looked like we were going to get there, right? Peak at 300, peak at 200, peak a little bit lower. And we were constantly testing that 150. But now, nope, that's just a nope by the market, and we are pulling back up. 180 for the sellers and 177 for the buyers. Only 2 ISK margin between the first seller and the first buyer, and that first buyer is coming in with 19 million units here as well. Then we've got the tungsten carbide market. Let's take a look at that one. This one actually able to get back to its more normal range between 150 and 200. You can see that we did have another breakout back above 200. So the question is, right here at the low end, we're at like 158. Let's see if we can get to that 158 average again. On this one, it doesn't feel likely. 183 for the sellers, 175 for the buyers of tungsten carbide. If there's one thing that hasn't really moved that much, despite, you can see that here again, the April rush and everything that happened around the changes in industry, it is the metamaterials. They've been surprisingly stable throughout all of this. You can see that here, 12.5 average range, bit above, bit below, but nothing too special. So let's see if there's anything happening here. Well, for photonic metamaterials, we went down actually to 12,000 ISK, but that has already stalled right at the tail end. 12,000 for the sellers, 11,270 for the buyers. But you can also see this is like, yeah, we're not going to bring even more photonic metamaterials at the current prices, and here buyers have not been forced up just yet. So this one, at least the first one of these metamaterials, is not showing that increased demand. Then we've got the Caldari ones. Here is non-linear metamaterials that are also, I would say, below average, below 20k, and not able to make its way back. Less than 20,000 for the sellers, 18.5 for the buyers. Normal margin. This feels also like a little bit oversupplied compared to the buyers, and thus we get that below average price. This is what you would expect in a more general market. Then we've got the plasmonic metamaterials, actually still under pressure, also moving, I would say, below average, touching that 15,000 ISK average price. 15,600 for the sellers, 15,150 for the buyers. And then terahertz metamaterials, again slightly below average, getting back just above 15,000 for this one. And this is where, well, honestly, I don't know. There must also be a reason why these metamaterials have been so much more stable compared to the carbides, despite the fact that they're also advanced moon materials. And then generally here what we're seeing is we're slightly below average, slightly oversupplied on this one, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that increased demand and activity is not happening. It could just be that in the new industry changes, it's taking a little bit of a back. Well, no, it's Tech 2 related. That all of the changes and everything happening in the game has basically been absorbed way more easily by the metamaterials market than the carbide market. And then let's take a look at the other advanced materials that have basically been under pressure all summer long. You can see here fermionic condensates, 1 year low point at 50,000 ISK, 53 for the sellers, 49 for the buyers. The only good news you could say here is that we're probably starting to form a bottom, but that's about it. Then we've got the ferrogel that is also back pretty much at a 1 year low point, maybe testing this here, well below 30k, 29 for the sellers, 28 for the buyers. So this is clearly not doing very well. Fullerite, all right, first little bump, but easily absorbed again, and we're heading back below 750 already. 774 for the sellers, 700 ISK for the buyers. That's way larger of a margin than anything we've seen in the previous categories, so this is clearly still struggling quite heavily. Hypersynaptic fibers back below 9,000 ISK, really. Yeah, sellers below 9, 8,500 for the buyers. So that is just still the reality. Nanotransistors below 4,000 ISK as well. Phenolic composites landing on that 1500. Very strong performance after the industry changes, going up to 2000 ISK, gaining a third of its price from the start of the year, but has been fully absorbed, and with these higher volumes we're actually landing right back on that price, 1560 for the sellers and 1480 for the buyers. Now decently narrow margin, but definitely not any of the premiums that we're seeing here anymore. And the ceramic fibers, same story here. You can see around April with the announcement we had like, all right, we need more ceramic fibers, going from 300 to 500 ISK, able to plateau until the summer, and then we pull back and we're back below 400 ISK, right on a pretty much average range for it. 373 for the sellers and 366 for the buyers. And I would say here, potentially, if you're also looking for a speculative play on increased demand and increased activity, then a chart like fermionic condensates, like ferrogel, like hypersynaptic fibers, they do look kind of interesting, of course. So that would be my thinking here if I'm looking to invest, if I'm looking to prepare, which we've seen all of that buying happening in PI, buying happening in minerals, buying happening in plex stuff. Then perhaps advanced moon materials are just lagging behind, haven't been on the radar of the market of those speculators just yet, and this could be an opportunity. But I'll be honest, I do also feel like it's a little bit risky, because we are seeing what has changed, what has basically gained a little bit from the industry changes. It's all the carbides, and some of these are starting to pull back up a little bit. But they're just a bit above average. But then these metamaterials have really been like super stable around their average range, and to be able to do that over the course of an entire year, especially this last year, does indicate that, well, this is like, it has found its market, and there just may not be enough interest out there to really speculate on it. It's a very difficult choice, because we are seeing 1 year low points though. So advanced movements, if you're feeling a little bit risky, then you could still have an inflation or increased activity play in there. Let's take a look at Tech 2 ships next, coming in at 33.10. Has anything changed on this one? I think I'm only holding the Manticore now, so I also sold, it was one of those Tech 2 mining ships. I think this was the Prospect. Yeah, saw this happening in the market. So bought for 21 million, sold for 25 million. It's not a big profit, but it's a profit. All these numbers are always after taxes. So all of these trades have been done with profits. So I would say pretty nice. Not always as much as I would have liked to, but showing that it is definitely possible to do some trading in the Tech 2 market, although lately I have not been liking the trends too much, so let's see what's happening. Here is the Basilisk continuing to go back down towards 200 million ISK on the chart, 212 for the sellers, 185.4 for the buyers. We are lacking in buyers, and despite this you can see we still have people that are bringing in a couple of Basilisk at this point. So this is the place where you have the best chance of picking up a buy order. And keep in mind, I've managed to do a trade on the Basilisk, buying for 200, selling for 230. So now with this chart, yeah, here we had this little bump here that was like, no, not low enough. You're buying now for like 185, definitely below 190 should be possible. Yes, Basilisk for me is back in the buy order territory, and I suspect that it won't last very long. Then we get Cerberus. This one is doing something different. Unfortunately, never really reached that 200 million and is already moving back up on the chart. 235 for the sellers, couple of aggressive buyers at 205 million. 20 units, 15 units. That unfortunately is really going to keep us from getting that less than 200 million opportunity. And thus I don't think we're going to be in for a Cerberus trade at this point until potentially this is absorbed. And yeah, couldn't tell you. I've got some old Cerberus trades that I made, actually very successful ones, but don't have the reference at this point. I deleted that. And then we get the Guardian. Yeah, too flat, not low enough. So for me this is another no. 196 million for the sellers, 182 for the buyers, 182 on the chart. I mean, you can, right? If you really want a Tech 2 gamble and you want to buy a Guardian just above 180 million, it's not a bad purchase. I should have a Guardian trade here. Yeah, bought for 185, sold for 200 million. You can see it's not a big profit, but it's definitely possible, and you can jump in below this price. So yeah, that's like a maybe, like you could do it, but we're basically still in the process. The Basilisk is really nice with this lack of buyers. Now that could get filled very quickly, so you're gonna want to be fast on this one, but the Guardian is basically still in that process because we still have quite a few buy orders, and potentially we could even still be nibbling at these at the moment, which means that if you're going for like 182, 183, you want to stay just below 185, that's absolutely like I feel really confident that you're still going to be able to grab a Guardian at this point. Then you've got the Hound, which bounced back from 22.5 on the chart. So right now, I would say nope. 26.6 for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. Yeah, that's a little bit, too much of the in-between spot for me to be trading on this one. Ichthyrsa is here to get a little bit of a feeling as to what's happening with Triglavian stuff. Still slowly going down, basically. 659 for the sellers, 625 for the buyers. Not sure what's happening Alliance Tournament wise with Triglavian ships, but potentially that could be a speculative play. You do want to read up on the rules there. I don't know if they can even be used. Then we get the Ishtar. Yeah, again, right, pretty nice here, a data point where we reached 200 million. So buying below 200 million I think does make sense. I bought for 206, sold for 221. But I don't think we're anywhere near that. Yeah, 220 for the sellers, 208 million for the buyers. So this is still that volatility that has been declining. Eventually we'll get a trigger, something will happen, but this is not the right place to move in. Then we get the Manticore. All right, that's a more interesting drop-off, touching 25 million on the chart right now. 29 million for the sellers, 25 million for the buyers. So this is interesting as well. I bought a Manticore for 27 million after taxes, so you can definitely buy better than this. We can also see the margin has started to open up a little bit, but right now 100 million here. 100 units right here and another 40 here, all of this in like the 30 to 29 million range. It's quite a lot, so this pressure could build. This pressure could actually build, and we could go even lower on these buyers that are way smaller in volumes. Definitely already interesting in my book, but with the right patience you can do way better than my buy, which I've done like I think on this drop or something like that. Definitely bought a little bit too early looking back, but I'm ready with the Manticore, so we'll see if we can get a spike at some point. Well above 30, that's when I'm selling and I'll be taking my profits. For the Munin, we get a bounce as we touched 180. So again, if you want to be buying right now, nope. If you bought at the lowest price, you can definitely take a little bit of profit at this point. 218 for the sellers, 199 million for the buyers. That's two nopes. Then we get the Nemesis flat at 25 million, not where we want to be. And look at that, 25.7 for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Probably the narrowest margin we've seen for the Nemesis. That has basically really lacked the volatility since the April rush. Then we get the Oniros that's slowly going back up. Unfortunately, never really broke 180 that well. I think here I called a couple of buy opportunities for one cheap Oniros. I think if I'm not mistaken, you could have bought like for like 160 or something like that. We're back at 193 million for the sellers, 175 for the buyers. So small trade was possible here, but this is something that I've been mentioning over the last couple of weeks. The nice big waves that were happening when we also had really a lot of speculation and a lot of, where is the Caldari one? Right here. A lot of spikes right like this in the carbide market. Those are not happening right now. I think it's also because of the summer slump that all of this is not doing so well. So in general, it's not the best place to be doing trades. If I'm looking to buy, I'm really looking to buy at those really low prices, close to 1 year low points or very big margins that have opened up, like right here for the Basilisk, where there's no buyers, you're buying well below 190. You know, let's see if we can get the 185 or something like that to show up. So you're probably buying down here somewhere at the moment. That's an opportunity, but I'm also not looking for like Twitch trading or anything like that. I think your best sell opportunities are a couple months out at least. Then we've got the Panther next for you know, some battleships here. Try to keep them in there to get a feel of general cost, which shouldn't be that special at the moment. 1.3 billion for the sellers, 1.25 billion for the buyers. Pretty narrow margin, slightly up. Then we get the Purifier flat on 25. And this dip, you could have definitely bought that, but unfortunately my prediction of a lack of volatility is clearly established right here. You can see the peaks at 35, 32.5, 30 million, and then now, well, yeah, the volatility is just out of this market. We managed to do a bounce from 22.5 to 25 million. So no, buy below 22 million right here was probably possible, but this is like not a quick turnover. This is something you want to hold for a longer period. 25 million for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Also way too narrow margin, of course, to be jumping in my opinion. Scimitar, same story, right? Went up here to 250, then at 230, and now you can see that just that decline with those bottoms never really going back to like 180 on the chart or anything like that. 202 million for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. So that's again two nopes. Then we get the Widow. All right, kind of pushing prices up, which, if we're looking at this from the perspective that these are like the larger Tech 2 items that you can make, these battleships, then this could be another trend of expecting higher prices, expecting manipulation, expecting increased demand. Although there are also Black Ops battleships, there could be other systems at work for these, nullsec related, maybe even Alliance Tournament related. I'm not really sure on that. It's also 1.3 billion for the sellers and a bit above 1.2 for the buyers. Then we get the Zealot, and this, just like with the Guardian, could potentially, right, this looks, it's not a bottom just yet. We're looking for like that 180, but data points right now are touching that already. Sellers at 200 million, buyers 182 million. So if you're looking for, I need that Tech 2 investment right now, well, you're buying at the very low edge of this chart, at least for the Zealot. I would say that that's a possibility. And why the hell is Zydrine here? Let's remove that. Must have made a mistake at some point. Let's move on then to the Tech 3 market. Yeah, for trading, I mentioned this Vapel could be like a shorter term trade that we could have made like last week. If I'm correct on that, we'll take a look at this. But for now, I'm looking to buy and hold, to buy for like, hopefully increased activity and just a little bit of general inflation to either bring volatility back or to be able to take advantage of that. That's my vision of how I would play the market at the moment. So Tech 3 coming in at 43.30. like that. And as always, we'll start with the destroyers, tactical destroyers, and I was not expecting that, but this should be good news for my Zwepel prediction, as the Confessor makes its way towards 55 million, a second leg up. I thought we would be able to absorb that, but nope, still probably lacking in supply. 53 million for the sellers, 50 million, almost 48 million for the buyers. And finally some supply is starting to come in. This is a full page of new sell orders that has driven the price back down, so we're gonna stop this ascent at this point, but this should demand quite a bit of supply to at least bring the price back down below 50 million on average. The Hecate has stopped its descent well above 50 million at this point, so 52 million for the sellers, 50 million for the buyers, and there is still no supply coming in here, which feels kind of crazy unless it's 79, but I don't suspect this to be fresh supply, so this is still very, very expensive. And where the hell is the supply? It's not here either. Then we get the Jackdaw that did make its way up to 55 million, that was absorbed. So now supply is in the Confessor, but at really high prices, all above 50 million. And then we get the Jackdaw that is back below 50 million, just 50 million for the sellers and 45 million for the buyers. We do have 100 of them here, and then a little bit supply coming in the last couple of days. This should be very good news for the Zwepel, right? All of these 50 and up, the Zwepel is still not moving. It's still well below 45 million, and in fact went down for the last week. 43 million for the sellers, 40 million for the buyers. We're starting to run out of buyers. I would again say, if you're looking for that play, I would try to buy a Zwepel as close as possible to 40 million. Is considering where all these other tactical destroyers are, this supply, I mean, it is starting to dry up. Just a couple of sell orders in the last 24 hours. 49. We need Hecates, right? Because there's no, we need and then they're coming in. As I'm making the video, another 15 have come in to start and push the price back down, but the Confessors are going to normally absorb a lot of effort. So does the Hecate, well above 50, and the Jackdaw doesn't see that much supply despite being 50 million. This should give this Zwepel some breathing room. A 40 to above 45 million play should be possible, in my opinion, at this point. So yeah, that's the move I may make. I mean, I'm not sure, I don't always go in about my ideas on this one. Sometimes I'm just too lazy to go to G10 to do a buy, but if I were to make a short-term play, it would be trying to buy a couple of Zwepels. Then we've got our cruisers. Here is the Legion market, went to 180, and then the market said that's low enough. We're back at that low point from the last half year or so. So 200 million for the sellers, 187 for the buyers. Well, I think that it's actually a pretty normal price for the Legion. Then we've got the Loki heading for 200 million as well. 193 million in fact for a couple of sellers. All right, some aggressive selling. 180 million for the buyers. That's down here again. Yeah, let's see if this has more legs. Then maybe trying to buy below 180 for a Loki could be a good idea. Then we've got the Proteus that is also stopping its descent after reaching, what would that be here? 160 million ISK, back to 180 for the sellers, 172 for the buyers. And then we get the Tengu that's actually going down right now, but coming from that 1 year high point at 280 million ISK. This is only kind of normalizing at this point. 186 for the sellers, 179 million for the buyers. I would still say that I would not be gambling on this decline just yet. We do see that these sharp declines do have a little bit of a bump after that on the Proteus and on the Legion, but it's still, you know, we're not really that low where I would say this is a sure bet. So I would be careful in the cruiser market. There just is a little bit more demand, so we're talking a new reality, new average prices, new bottom prices for these cruisers that will need to be found. And again, volume wise, it's a small enough market that it's easily manipulated. Then we still have an extra product for the week, and I chose the Minmatar faction ships to take a look and see if we get more trends happening here. That's going to be at 48.20. like that. So this is a new way of checking these. I thought it was pretty interesting, but we have frigates, faction frigates, navy faction, and then we have, for instance, a Republic fleet Firetail that's definitely trading at the high end of its range, so showing expensive loyalty points for Minmatar, above 14 million for the sellers and above 12 million for the buyers. Definitely quite expensive, volume wise not doing that great. Then we've got the, I think, yeah, fleet is what we're looking for. So Vigil fleet issue, definitely a little bit of upwards pressure on this one as well, heading for 17.5 on the chart. 18 million for the sellers, 13 million for the buyers. So again, expensive prices, expensive loyalty points should indicate that a Mars side is winning out a little bit. If you happen to have some of these, definitely, in my opinion, a decently good time to sell. Let's see if this is then confirmed in the cruisers. So we're looking for fleet stuff. Here is the side fleet issue. On this chart, definitely trading at the high end of its range, selling for 84 million, buyers coming in at 70 million ISK. So healthy margin, but you can see from these average prices, sellers are dictating in this time when LP is expensive and difficult to get. And the Stabber, well, it's not a spike, but 75 million, starts the year at 50 million. And selling in fact for 87 million ISK is definitely quite expensive at the moment. And then we've got, do we have faction battle cruisers? Navy faction, yes we do. We got one of them, Hurricane fleet issue, started to pull back. So this one also above 200 million for most of the summer. Pretty damn expensive, but a first sign of a little bit of a pullback. 194 million for the sellers, 181 million for the buyers. And then I think the battleships can generally show some nice trends as well. So let's take a look at fleet stuff here. We've got a Tempest fleet issue, also pulled back. The high point was 700 million ISK. We're now selling at 570, buyers coming in at 525. And then we get a Typhoon fleet issue that's also away from the top price, but still pretty expensive on this 1 year chart, selling for 650 million pretty much, buyers coming in above 600 million ISK. So a bit of a mixed story. We're definitely in an expensive phase for Minmatar, so expensive loyalty points and not that much supply. A decently good time to sell, but we are starting to see a little bit of pressure in the battle cruisers, the larger ships, thus the battle cruisers and the battleships, which to me is kind of strange. You would expect the larger ones, harder to buy ones, to have more inertia than the small ones. But yeah, it looks like we don't have faction for destroyers, right? No, it does look like at the moment, if you have cruisers or frigates from the fleet issues, so from the Minmatar faction, then it's a really good time to be selling. You're probably getting a very nice price for that. So there you go, guys. That's it for this EVE talk. As always, thank you very much for watching and listening, and I'll see you all next time.